Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. A couple of days ago, we received a very surprising news about the AFSPA being removed from certain districts in the northeast in the states Assam, Manipur, and so on and so forth. This is a very important discussion considering what kind of incidents that have taken place in the past 6 months to a year in that region, especially with the ongoing crisis in Myanmar. This development actually tells us there is something on the churn in that entire region. What is it? How is it going to span out? And what is the future of the forces positioned in that area? To discuss this, I have with me Lieutenant General Shokin Chauhan, someone who knows the Northeast very well. He was the Director General of the Assam Rifles and is even today consulted for various issues and matters concerning the northeastern part of the country. I've had the privilege of talking to him about the Northeast in 2 videos, which I would recommend if you want to get a history of that place. Please do check out before you watch this or after. You can actually get to know what the problems in that area are. Sir, thank you so much for joining. And with your great experience, it's going to be wonderful to actually learn what is happening in that region and why these steps were taken.
Thank you, Aadi. Pleasure being on your show again. It's a very important topic that you've chosen. The Northeast and the removal of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. So I think it should be fun and interesting talking to you about it.
So let's just begin with the significance of such a move on the ground with the people, with the politics. How do you see this?
Aadi, it's been about since 1956. In fact, this law came into force in 1958, only for Nagaland at that time. Because the Indian Army was involved in counter-insurgency operation in Nagaland since 1956, we found that we were handicapped without a law which permitted the army to operate freely in this counter-insurgency role, and therefore the government brought in this particular act, which is actually a copy of the British Act that was in force in 1946. So when the AFSPA was brought in, or the Armed Forces Special Powers Act was brought in, it was an enabling act. It was an act that was to permit the armed forces to operate in disturbed areas and give them certain powers so that they would be effective in their counter-insurgency role. So that's the reason why it came in. Unfortunately, as the army grew more successful and as the insurgency took more time, I have to admit that certain elements within the armed forces misused this act, and certain human rights abuses were made as the situation developed. And since 1979, 1980, there has been a cry in various parts of the Northeast to repeal this act. Many of the cries, many of the representations that went were from organizations, non-governmental organizations that were actually part of the insurgent groups themselves. What you call the overground workers. They had made certain organizations, non-NGOs, and these OGWs or the NGOs had filed cases in the Supreme Court and the government that the Armed Forces Special Powers Act should be repealed so as to reduce the effect or reduce the ability of the army to operate in these areas. So the significance of this is the questions we have to ask ourselves. What is the security situation in the parts of the Northeast where the AFSPA has been repealed? That's the first question we must ask ourselves. Secondly is, in case the situation deteriorates, can we bring back this act? The third question is, can the army operate in these areas or in these districts without AFSPA? And the fourth question would be, how will the army have to modify its standard operating procedures to operate in this area. So I feel these are the important issues that we will have to deal with, which the Indian Army will have to deal with as the situation unfolds. But the repealing of the AFSPA from certain police stations was a given, Adi. You could not have stopped it, especially after the December 4th unfortunate incident in the voting village on December 4th, where 13 villagers lost their lives in an operation by an army unit.
So, talking about the decision itself, what were the factors do you think that led to the government actually taking a step like this? Was it the incident itself and the repercussions, and to try and calm the population down in that area? And also, what are the requirements on the ground one must actually achieve to have this kind of a development in the region, sir?
Adi, see, we've got to be clear about a couple of issues. That AFSPA is an enabling act. That means it gives a legal protection to the armed forces as they operate in those areas. It's been given a bad, dirty word because of the, because of certain inimical elements within the army who probably misused that. But overall, the army has always held forth on the fact that, we were very firm about operating and not hurting the civilians. But definitely, the incident on the 4th of December was a major incident, was a major issue. There's just no doubt about it. Secondly, I would say that especially in the state of Nagaland and Manipur, the BJP is in power. In Manipur, it is in power on its own. In Nagaland, it is in a alliance with the NDPP led by Chief Minister Rio. In Shillong, it is in an alliance led by Conrad Sangma. And in all these places, and in Assam, it's in power on its own. In all these places, the chief ministers of these states had spoken to the Prime Minister and the Home Minister, stressing the need to remove the AFSPA from their areas. So it was a political decision. Prior to taking this decision, there was a high-level committee which went on the ground, which included the Director General of the Assam Rifles, wherein they worked out the situation and decided from which districts they could safely remove the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, and from which districts it would not have a problem. So this is the background to why the AFSPA has been removed from these districts. But I also must caution the listeners here that removal of the AFSPA from districts where there has been no violent incident in the last 5 years, in the last 3 years, doesn't mean it can't happen again. And the caveat here, Adi, is that if it happens again, AFSPA can always come back again. So it's not a permanent issue. If peace continues and AFSPA can be further removed from the further districts where it is, and if the peace deteriorates, then the AFSPA can be re-added there. But the army will continue to stay, the army will continue to be deployed, and the army will continue to operate in these areas.
Sure. I think, after the first question, you asked 4 very pointed questions. You've kind of given an answer to probably 2 of them in this particular answer. And let me actually see if you actually answer the rest too. Otherwise, I'm going to prod you with an answer for that as well.
By all means, yes.
So, you mentioned about actually resurgence of violent incidents, and the Chinese have, the grey zone activities in terms of creating this sort of little bit of disturbance within India has been a, sort of a thing that they've been doing for a long time. And we know some of these guys have been trained in China. They buy their weapons from Ruli, and it's all very well known and documented today. How does the armed forces today plan to cover that kind of a smuggling route which can be open from Burma as well as China?
Adi, there are two issues here. One is the border guarding role of the Assam Rifles.
Yeah.
The responsibility of guarding the border or to managing the border, the Indo-Myanmar border with the Assam Rifles. The Assam Rifles has certain police pass along the 16-kilometer belt of the Indo-Myanmar border. So those police powers are adequate enough to give Assam Rifles the ability to counter any such insurgent movement there. The army does not guard the border in the IMB or the Indo-Myanmar border. It is with the Assam Rifles, and those powers are with the Assam Rifles. But what should be clear is that we have operated in areas where there was no AFSPA. And the standard operating procedures have been modified in those areas and are effective enough to prevent any resurgence of violence. Now, will the Chinese trained insurgent groups try and create mayhem? Well, that's what they are insurgents for. They will create mayhem. So, I feel that we are capable enough to handle them without the AFSPA. Time will tell. And like I said, the caveat is that if they decide to create more disturbances in these areas, we can always rebring the AFSPA.
That's pretty clear, sir.
For example, the AFSPA has been removed from parts of Dimapur, from Newland. That's a city. Dimapur and Newland are twin cities next to each other. From Kohima, from Wokha. So these are areas where there have been very little violent incidents, very few, and where the density of population is very high. And we are also clear, because I have lived in Kohima just a year back, that people were fed up with the presence or the very a very strong presence of the Assam Rifles. So that signature might have to be reduced. So these are a few of the things that might have to be reduced. But I think we've got it all covered, and I think we're pretty clear on how we've got to carry out our operations.
I think a parallel with developmental efforts which are kind of taking place, along with some sort of a semblance of unity and peace, would go a long way in actually, calming things down in that region. It's something that we've seen happening today in J&K as well, and it's also all about human emotion. I guess it's the same all over the world. So, talking about that violent incident, that deadly issue that actually took place, which kind of exploded into something that I don't think any of us expected to happen. It was a mistake. It was acknowledged by a lot of people, yourself included. And I think a lot of work was done on the ground to kind of mold the people there and to try and do something. How do you think that would have gone through for something like this to happen? And how is it monitored? Is there a system where these kind of efforts are monitored on the ground?
Aadi, when you deal with tribal societies have an inbuilt mechanism for dealing with mistakes leading to deaths of their family. And they have their own customs, they have their own tribal, and if you do express genuine regret, these societies do forgive you. I have personally faced this when I was a post commander in Ukhrul district of Manipur, where we did make a mistake, but I did express genuine regret, and they let it go. So I feel that since the Home Minister also spoke about this in the Parliament, the armed forces, the army, and the Assam Rifles have reached out to the village of Poting, and have expressed their regret. I'm hoping that the villages have, forgiven them and have decided to move forward. There was a court of inquiry, as you're aware, uh, of the army to deal with the mistakes that have happened. Certain standard operating procedures were altered, and the guilty are in the process of being punished. By nature, the army does not publicize the punishment, but I can assure the viewers that uh, anything where such a mistake happens, uh, the army will definitely try its best to ensure that it doesn't happen again. We are not an army that acts with impunity within its own within our own country. We hold the rights of the people dearest to our hearts, and we are absolutely clear that we have to win the hearts and minds of the people. Every insurgency, the center of gravity are the people. The people are the center of gravity of this, and we hope that the mothers stop allowing their sons and daughters to join this insurgency. Once that happens, genuine peace will come about.
I'm sure, sir. Absolutely. There is no question about it. So, what do you think about the efforts of the government there? We've suddenly seen the first train which has gone into certain parts of the Northeast after almost 75 years of our independence. Proud moment and also a shameful one at the same time. And I say it with no regret. We have missed doing our bit for the past so long, but fair enough. There is a realization and there is some movement. Of course, in India, things do take time. These efforts, plus the developmental efforts, and much more which is happening on the ground, how do you think that really affects the ground situation, sir?
Aadi, this first train, I must tell you that Manipur had Jiribam as a railway station 20 years ago. From Jiribam, this train has moved forward towards Imphal. It's brought in great hope amongst the people. And hopefully this train will move forward till the More border, at least till Imphal. Imphal is well connected by air also, number of flights in Imphal. We need to do much, much, much more, Adi. Let me just try and bring down these things to you. Roads and communication systems is just one part, 1/100th of what you need to do in the Northeast. You have to bring in industries, you have to bring in schools and colleges. You have to give the children of the Northeast hope for their future. You have to improve their future. And you have to integrate the Northeast into mainland India, both culturally, economically, and actually wholeheartedly. So a lot needs to be done, Adi. A lot of villages, a lot of districts are still cut off. A lot of people still walk. Monsoon is fast going to come now. Monsoon starts early in the Northeast, sometime by May. That means next month. And then there's a 4-month-long monsoon period where heavy rains prevent any kind of movement. So we need to do much more. And, I'm happy that the start has been made. And politically, the state of Manipur seems to be stable. The state of Nagaland is stable. The state of Mizoram is stable. The state of Meghalaya is stable. And Assam is stable. And if you heard, even a better issue is that the chief minister of Assam and Meghalaya and Mizoram have started sitting down together to try and find a solution to the vexed boundary issue that exists between them. There are 88 points of dispute between them. Much of it political. They have to sort this out. You have to remove this baggage of the past and you have to move forward.
One small thing was sorted out, and that was a relief to quite a lot of us who hope for a lot of stability in that region and for the people to be able to get the facilities and everything else, and much more, as a matter of fact, because that area has been ignored for a long time.
Yes,
So I have no thing saying the factor that they should get much more than everybody else, because they need to
absolutely,
be brought
absolutely,
up par and brought up par fast. There is no question about it.
absolutely.
So now, as far as the armed forces is concerned, of course, there's within the forces. I'm sure the seniors are taking up briefings with regards what the roles are going to be, how the two questions which were pending with regards how the armed forces are going to act in those areas. Are they even allowed to kind of operate in and around those areas when there are certain issues? What will be the level of coordination with the police and the local intelligence sources, and so on and so forth? There will be a lot of questions that will arise with regards to the special forces, with regards to the Assam rifles, and many other units that are operating in that area. What would you like to say to them, sir?
When things change, the army of that armed forces also have to change, and it is clear to the armed forces that this change was coming. And like I said, we during the initial time of the problems in Assam, I was operating there in Assam in the late 80s and early 90s, and we dealt with districts that were not under the AFSPA. So we have a clear idea of how to deal with insurgents in areas not under the AFSPA. In fact, Mizoram does not have AFSPA, and we have the Assam Rifles there guarding the border, and we carry out the operations where we need to carry them out. There needs to be, and there should have been from the beginning, a much greater interaction with the local police. Uh, we need to get them on board. We need to get joint institutions functioning in the state. We need joint sharing of intelligence, and we need to carry out joint operations. If there are drugs being smuggled, I'll just give you an example. You must carry the members of the narcotic control board with you. Those members must be there. If there is fake currency being smuggled, then you must carry members of the ED with you. Similarly, the local police must be and always must be a force multiplier for you.
Mm.
Their dealing with the local people is much closer, and so also the local administrator, whether he is the district commissioner or the district collector, or he is the local SP, or the ASP, or the local SI of the police station. This interaction has to be very close. You can't ignore them. You should never have ignored them. And what happened in voting showed us the perils of ignoring the local police and the local Assam Rifle unit. So we have to be very plain and very clear about all this. We have to look inwards and sweep the cobwebs away, because there are certain things that you can't do again and you can't redo. And especially when you kill human beings, there will always be a problem.
There's a cost on the backlash, sir.
Yes.
So finally, a message. I know you have. I won't be, quite certain about it, but you have a lot of people who listen to you with regards to your opinion of that entire region. Your message to them, sir.
My message would be that don't be worried about changes. They're bound to happen. That's the first issue. Secondly, the issue about Armed Forces Special Powers Act as an enabling act can be dealt with. You can operate in non-AFSPA areas. That should not stop you from gaining intelligence. That should not stop you from creating joint institutions. That should not stop you from taking the local police on board and the local civil authorities on board. I have noticed, Aadi, especially for post commanders, I would say that there are a number of non-governmental organizations in villages. The local village headman is there. And I've always felt that they have the best for their village at heart. They always keep the best thing for their village. And the best thing for the village is that the insurgency shouldn't reoccur there. So The local headman or the Gaon Buddha, as we call him, can be taken on board, can be made a part of your deciding team. And the problems of what might happen if insurgency restarts in these areas should be very clear to the local people. I have always advocated, even as the Director General of the Assam Rifles, I have advocated operation with the human face. I have said that don't ever kill an innocent man, even if that means that you let go a guilty one. The innocent person should never be touched. Because like I said, insurgency, the fulcrum of insurgency, the center of gravity of insurgency is the people. And the day the people decide that they are not going to support this insurgency, that day onwards, this insurgency starts dying. So our idea is that jointly we must kill this insurgency, we must finish it off. We must finish it off from the minds of the people. So I have been an advocate of this, and I feel that there is enough space for the armed forces and the Assam Rifles to operate and to create standard operating procedures.
Battle of the hearts and minds, indeed, sir.
Absolutely, Aadi. Absolutely.
That is what the game is.
They need to be more innovative and human about how they're going to carry out their operations.
Absolutely. Heavy hands work sometimes, but most of the time it has to be a softer touch.
They do. And at this particular stage, with so much of peace having come in, what you really need is innovative methods to bring the people with you.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much. You're one of the most respected voices when issues of the Northeast come by, and I'm sure, and I really hope that a lot of people from there, that part of the world, that part of the nation, that part of the society of which belongs, which is such an integral part of India, listens to you and probably understands where the thought process is from and what is in store for them in the future. It's critical that we get this right, because as far as we are concerned, it needs to be as normal as anywhere else in the country. Thank you so much once again, sir.
Thank you, Aadi. Thank you.
And for the next time, for another interesting subject, Jai Hind.
Yes. Jai.